You guys ready? Everybody ready? Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for coming. I'm Chad Meadows. I am the principal of CodeWrite Planners, and we are the firm who's been asked to help the county with developing your new land use and development ordinance. And so we're here tonight to talk about the code diagnosis document, which is a part of this process. And with me tonight in the green is Karen. Karen Mallow is she's been working with me for a few years now. We write development codes for local governments around the South, and we're very happy to be here with you guys. In fact, we've been around Anderson County for about a year. We helped with the comprehensive plan effort that congratulations to the county for you guys getting that part done. Comprehensive plan is an important piece of information. It's the policy foundation for the development code that is to come, the land use and development ordinance. And so I'm here tonight to talk with you guys about where we are, what happens next, and answer your questions. And so I am going to give you a 10, 15, 20-minute presentation about the document. And then I'm going to try to answer some questions. Some of you wrote questions down on cards. Hopefully you've given those to Karen. If the mood hits you while I'm talking and you want to write a question down, let Karen know. She'll bring you a card. If you don't want to write it down on a card and just want to ask it, we'll be passing around a microphone to do that as well. So we're here to try to make this process a little easier to understand. We're here to get y'all's input and your feedback and your suggestions and your recommendations. We're very early on in the process here. We haven't staked out any territory. We're not married to any concepts. We're here to talk about what works in some other areas and get y'all's feedback and thoughts in pursuit of the best possible ordinance for the county that we can get. Now, there's a meeting here tonight, and then there's one tomorrow. So we've got another open house in the next room over. I'm sorry we weren't able to have it in this room tomorrow morning, but at, I think, noon tomorrow I guess that would be room B, right to the right. We'll be back. We'll be giving the exact same presentation. But if you know friends, neighbors, whomever, or if you decide you want to come back because it was so much fun, you just wanted to hear it again, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you guys come and share and hear from you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Can everybody hear me okay? A little bit closer.
It would be better since you asked.
Okay. How about now?
That's better.
That's better? Okay. All right. I'm going to try to stand here. Yeah, you know I want to walk over there, right, and move my hands around and all that stuff, and I'll try not to do that. I'll stay right here by the microphone. Okay. All right. So here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about the project background generally. We'll talk about the code diagnosis, what it is, what's in there. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. We'll talk about what it looks like and where to get it. Inside of the code diagnosis are a series of 6 key themes for improvement. Details on those key themes are on the boards behind you on the wall. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, please do so before you leave tonight because that information is up there. This is also on the webpage. I'll talk about that in a second as well. Once we've had an opportunity to talk about the key themes for improvement, we'll talk about the next steps, what happens after tonight, and then finally we'll get to the question and answer session. We're here until 8 o'clock, so if you have a lot of questions, that's great, and if you don't, that's great. We'll all go home early and get an early dinner. So, this is the Land Use and Development Ordinance project. These are your development regulations for unincorporated Anderson County. These rules do not apply within the cities. Okay, so Anderson, Star, this does not apply there. This is in the unincorporated county. Also, this is the development regulations. Okay, so this is all of the provisions that apply to people who want to rezone land or subdivide land or build a building or have an accessory use on their site. Now you have today a county code of ordinances. There are 2 chapters in your county code of ordinances that contain most of the relevant information. Chapter 24 is land use. Chapter 48 is zoning, okay? I know that you guys know that Anderson County is a partially zoned community. About 25% of the land area here in Anderson County has zoning. Another 75% doesn't. Here's maybe something that you didn't know, or that maybe you didn't realize. Chapter 24, land use, includes within it a set of provisions that deal with setbacks, driveways, signs, landscaping, standards for uses. Any use over 100 parking spaces has a special process that it needs to go through, where your driveways are located, etc. My friends, that's very close to zoning, except you just don't have the zoning districts. You don't have the use-related provisions that say this use can go there, that use can go there, or this use cannot go somewhere. And that's an important thing to remember as we go forward and talk about what this project is going to do, because this project will affect all the land in unincorporated Anderson County, whether you are zoned or not. Okay? This is a project wheel. It shows the 10 tasks in the project. A little bit confusing in that we are in task 3, the diagnosis. We've happily already completed tasks 1, 2, and 5. Okay, so the comprehensive plan was an important part of this project. That's been accomplished. Congratulations to you all for getting that work done. We are now following the comprehensive plan with the diagnosis and the annotated outline. When those initial steps are done, we'll begin the drafting. We expect to develop a document and an updated zoning map for you. Why are we here? One of the things that we've heard from everybody, the development community, people who live here, the staff, is that we have no coherent strategy for managing the growth that is coming to Anderson County. Okay? You guys have a development code. You've got chapters 24 and 48 in your county code of ordinances. That's fantastic. They're also from 1980, 1990. Okay? So these things are 40 years old. This was, respectfully, your father's zoning ordinance. This is an old piece of text trying to deal with very modern problems, right? Trying to deal with growth pressures from 2030. So there's a mismatch there. And it makes sense that, things aren't working like they're supposed to. We've also heard from everybody that the entire development process feels like a black box. Nobody really understands what are the steps in the process, what are the rules of the review, what standards are being applied, and we see there's a great deal of mistrust. Mistrust of the staff, mistrust of the development community, mistrust of your elected officials. One of the reasons why is because the standards aren't clear and things can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. We would suggest a more predictable development path for everybody in the hopes that people can begin to be a little bit more comfortable about the outcomes of the development process. Now, we've heard a lot about agriculture, right? We've heard a lot about protection of community character. We want to maintain the rural character that brought us to Anderson County, or that's blessed us as we've lived here over these years. And those things are possible. There are plenty of parts of Anderson County that are agriculture now and will remain in farming use well into the future. Obviously, there are other parts of the county that are subject to extreme growth pressures. And those areas are going to change. But we can remain true to community character, even in the face of the kind of growth and development pressure that we're seeing. You're going to get growth. Okay, that's going to happen. You guys are, in a major urban corridor between Atlanta to Charlotte to DC. You're going to get growth. Okay, 85 is going to bring growth. The auto industry is going to bring you growth. This will happen. But the growth that you do get should be high quality. We should not be having arguments and debates about the quality of residential development that's happening here. And I know we are. A lot of people are very unhappy about some of the recent residential development that's taken place in Anderson County. It doesn't have to be that way. You guys are a home rule state. In other words, you have the authority to make some rules about what development might look like, even in the unzoned portions of the county, okay? We are going to suggest a variety of high-quality development standards that would be integrated into your new development regulations, and some incentives, some reasons for a developer to want to do a better project. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Obviously, protecting property values, right? How many people want to sell their house for more than they paid for it? Yeah, everybody does, right? Supporting property values is one of the reasons why we have planning. It's one of the reasons why I followed this career. This is an important thing that we need to be aware of. People need to be able to develop their property. People need to be able to sell their property. That's very important to us as a society. Finally, some better tools for managing traffic, right? Traffic's not a problem here, right? Everybody's good with the traffic situation. We understand that transportation is the #1 problem that is facing this community. And it's not just a question of new roads and new development, it's a question of our current roads. The current roads that we have today were built 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago under rules that no longer work for us. So it's not just a question about how do we deal with this additional growth and development that's coming to the county, but also how do we deal with the fact that the roads that we do have aren't serving us, whether we had another house built here or not? How do we manage that? Stormwater is becoming ever more important. I know you guys go outside and you see the weather, and we hear about floods in Texas, floods in the Midwest, floods in the Northeast, and people are getting 6- and 7-inch rainfall events. I think I heard on the news 2 days ago that the place that got flooded in Texas last year, that was a 20-inch storm. Yesterday's storm, the day before storm, 30-inch storm. Imagine 30 inches of rainfall in 6 hours. This is the world, and stormwater is becoming ever more important. How we deal with it, how we manage it, not just for reasons of nuisance, but for reasons of safety. So these are our project goals, all right, to do a better job with these things. In case you don't know, I hope you do, we have a web page. It's called Anderson County LUDO, okay? www.andersoncountyludo.com. It'll be here for the life of this project. There's a place to sign up, join the mailing list if you want to be updated when we put new stuff on the web page, like this presentation, like the video that's being made right now, like the report on this meeting that we're having. That will be up on the project web page. Please sign up. You'll get an email every time we update the web page. This will run for the life of the project. There's details on the documents, how to participate, frequently asked questions, etc. So please go check it out. Okay, code diagnosis. Roadmap. This is our recipe book for how we would improve your development regulations, okay? It's a framework for discussion about potential change to your current regulations, okay? What are the things that need to be changed? How will we change them? Why? And what are the options? That's what this document seeks to do, is lay out that information. I talked about your comprehensive plan, your policy guidance. It's new, you just adopted it, okay? Your policy guidance is brand new, your rules are from 40 years ago, okay? There's gonna be a gap between those. This document explores that gap and contemplates ways for us to change the regulations to bring them into alignment with the new policy guidance, okay? It also provides recommendations for bringing your regulations into compliance with best practice. Okay, there's lots and lots of local governments across the country who are dealing with the exact same issues that you are. Some of those solutions are going to work here in Anderson County. Some won't, but some will. So we're going to provide some of those recommendations for your consideration. Is there anybody in the room who has looked at the code diagnosis yet? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, sort of, kind of. It's not edge of the seat stuff, don't read it when you're sleepy, for sure. If you do look at the document, please look at the first 3 pages. And I know I talked about this the last time we met here in May. Pages 1, 2, and 3 are the 70 recommendations that we would suggest be made. This, my friends, is your roadmap. This is your guidance. These are the things we want to do, spelled out in black and white. I agree that it's a little bit cryptic. You got to go and dig into some of the document to be able to read more detail about what's there. But this is the essence of change that we would suggest the county consider. And I'm going to talk more about each one of these 6 key themes, and then we'll talk about some questions. Increasing the ease of use of your document, okay? Your development code should look more like the one on the screen than the one that you have now. How many people have read your current zoning rules or your land use rules? 1, 2, 3? Some. Looks like a phone book, right? It's just text. That's all it is. In fact, it's hard to read text. Your experience working with your development regulations should look more like that. There should be illustrations. There should be summary tables. There shouldn't be long prose paragraphs of details. It needs to be short numbered sentences. It should be very clear about how I navigate around the document, how I find information that I'm looking for. If your code doesn't look like this, doesn't operate like this, then it ain't user friendly, and it needs to be, okay? While it's never a joy to sit down and cuddle up with your development regulations, it shouldn't be such a chore either, okay? Making your review procedures more predictable. By review procedures, I mean application review. When people submit for development in the county, they have to submit an application and it's reviewed. And this is whether I'm trying to build a deck, or I'm trying to build a house, or I'm trying to build a skyscraper. Not that anybody's trying to build a skyscraper in Anderson County, but you get the idea. There are a set of procedures that you have to follow. Those should be predictable. What does that mean? That means you read it, I read it, we agree on what it says. We agree on how the process should work. There's a few things that we think need to be done. Number one, we need more pre-submittal conferences with applicants, okay? In addition to that, we need more neighborhood meetings before an application is submitted. For certain kinds of developments, applicants should be submitting for neighborhood meetings for people around that development site so that people know what's proposed. Not after the application is submitted, before, okay? I've heard a lot of talk about special exceptions. A lot of concern on the part of the community about these these freebies, these changes, these departures from the rules that are embedded within the special exception process. We agree. There should be that needs to be tamed. It needs to be more clear about what is the process to establish a use here in the zoned portions, in the unzoned portions. It should never be the Wild West. We should all be able to agree on what are the steps in the process. And those uses and the process that we use to establish them should be vetted by the community, and you should be comfortable with them. Okay, that's what this process is about, is going over that. Having a uniform procedural structure. There's probably going to be, believe it or not, 35 or 40 procedures in this document. Everything from how do I get a driveway permit, to a building permit, to a sign, to a subdivision, to a rezoning, development agreement, all kinds of stuff. All of those procedures have some basic aspects that should be included in the discussion. What is the purpose of this thing? Where does it apply? Where doesn't it apply? Who makes the decision? What criteria do they use to make that decision? How do I amend the decision? How do I appeal the decision? Does it expire? If so, when? Those basic parameters need to be set down in writing up front for everybody, okay? We would strongly suggest the county consider a technical review committee. I know it says development review committee, but a technical review committee. Right now, today, your planning commission, bless their heart, they have a thankless task. They spend a lot of time reviewing development applications, okay, which is great. However, your planning commission is supposed to do what? Plan. That's what they're supposed to do. You have a staff to review development applications. You have elected officials to make decisions on difficult development applications. And if you don't like the decision that they make, you can vote them out, okay? Planning commission should be planning, and we'll talk more about what that looks like in a minute. But essentially, A technical review committee would be a body of your professional staff and members from state and regional agencies who come together to review your site plans, your subdivisions, your concept plans. These things that are technical in nature, all right? We don't need the Planning Commission talking about road tangents and street grades and sewer outfalls and things like that. That's technical material, all right? The Planning Commission should be focusing on your comprehensive plan, an annual audit to make sure it stays up to snuff, an annual audit of the development regulations. Are they working like we thought they were? What needs to be changed, right? Continuing to review and provide robust input on map amendments, on text amendments. They are the voice of the community, right? In terms of what should be done in terms of planning, where do we go? We have a big change for Planning Commission, and that is management of what we're calling an opportunities and constraints map, and I'll talk more about what that is in a second. But I don't want you to think that because we're suggesting that staff take responsibility for subdivision and site plan, that the planning commissioners can all just get their check and go home and be done. Oh no. We actually have real work for them to do, real work that they haven't been able to do because they've been busy reviewing development. Okay. So more predictable review procedures, more clarity, adjustments in the roles of who's doing what. Modernizing districts and uses. Now, I said before, 25% of the county has zoning. That means 75% of it doesn't have zoning, all right? One of the things that we heard loud and clear in the comprehensive plan and what we've heard from the community is that we have got to have a better tool to manage growth and development in the county, okay? In most places, that's done with zoning, okay? 75% of your county doesn't have zoning. So we have to find a way to manage growth and development in areas that don't have zoning. Here's what we want to suggest. Now, up on the screen is a map from your comprehensive plan. It's on page 22 in case you're interested. It's the residential suitability map. Areas that show green are considered suitable for residential. Areas that show red are considered not to be suitable for residential. And there's copies of these maps up on the wall if you want a closer look. We also have maps like this for commercial and industrial. You also have a future land use map, all right? This comprehensive plan map that says where we think uses are appropriate, okay? This plan, these maps, have been adopted. They are your adopted policy guidance. That's great. Also, look at all those colors. And if you look at three maps, you'll see it's a chaotic, there's a lot of colors on the map. It's hard to understand, way too complicated. We need something more clear. What we would suggest you consider is the inclusion in the LUDO of an opportunities and constraints map. A map that sets out portions of the county that are, quote, appropriate for development, opportunity areas, and inappropriate for development, constraint areas. Now, I want to be clear. Opportunity areas are not areas where we're going to go, crazy with growth and have giant skyscrapers and apartments everywhere. That's not the intention. But there are portions of the county that have sewer, that are proximate to interstates or collector streets, that have potable water service, that don't have environmental limitations on them. Those are areas that we would consider to be, quote, opportunity areas, and areas where growth may need to or should take place. And it should be easy, or at least easier, as long as we're very clear about what the rules are, and believe me, there'll be plenty of them. We're very clear about what the density is, and believe me, that'll be subject to deep consideration, okay? Then there's parts of the county that shouldn't have growth, or at least we shouldn't make it easy for growth because you don't have zoning today. People can propose whatever use they want. Okay? That's not good. Not good. Now, because you don't have zoning, we can't say no uses. We can't say no growth. What we can do is work with that system and create a set of disincentives for development in areas where it's not ready for growth. There's no proper infrastructure. There's no sewer, there's no water, the roads are crowded, it's farms, it's environmentally sensitive, whatever the reasons might be, of which there are many. Now, we don't have the authority to out and out limit development in those areas, okay? But we do have the ability to disincentivize development in those areas. So this is an approach that we want to explore. I wanted to float this idea out with the community today and in the coming days and weeks. You guys to think about this. This is a strategy for us to manage growth and development without a zoning map that's countywide. Okay, so it's something to consider. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but we want to explore this idea. Opportunities and constraints. You have 27 zoning districts in this county. 25% of your land area, about 100,000 acres, is zoned. You have 27 zoning districts, which is about 10 more than Charlotte, okay? 90% of the land that you have that is zoned is either zoned RA or R20. So you have 25 zoning districts that are applied to 10% of the 25% of your county that's zoned. Very small amount of land. It's a lot to manage. Got a lot of districts in there. Don't think you need that much complexity. So we would suggest that this be simplified. Not trying to open up and broaden characteristics and allow the growth to come in. Absolutely not. The notion is to just make the zoning districts where we have them easier to manage, easier to understand. Now we know there are at least 4 precincts that are under referendum this year for possible zoning, right? 4? 3? 4? 3? Okay. So you may have some more. Your percentage of zoning may be increasing. All the more reason to have some manageable zoning district designations as you go forward. You don't need 27. 12 is probably manageable, maybe 13. We are talking about adding a conditional zoning option. This is the ability of an applicant to propose additional conditions above and beyond the minimum standards. Why would they do that? Because they want the neighbors to support their project. So they might propose additional things, more open space, more buffering, better quality design. Okay, so that's the idea. But there's also a corollary here, a reciprocal, and that is the ability to propose development that seeks a relief from or a deviation from a minimum standard. The conditional zoning tool can do that too. However, if that's proposed, we would suggest some new standards, some required mitigation for that. If you want to deviate from a standard, you need to explain why. You need to explain why this development is going to be better because you're asking for this deviation and what you're going to give the county in return for that deviation. Okay, so keep an eye on this project as we go forward with this. Conditional zoning is a tool that is becoming ever more popular. It allows the county to negotiate with applicants about what's going to be built. It allows the public to have a more active participation in the discussion of what's to be built. It requires the applicant to get in front of the community earlier than is being required today. Okay, so there's a lot of good things that are built into this process. Now, we've also heard about the fact that it's getting ever more expensive to live in Anderson County, right? Is that true? Yes? Your kids, are they able to buy a house and come back and, move here after? No, too expensive, right? Double-edged sword for those of you who maybe have kids who are coming home. But in any case, the fact is, we have a housing crisis in this country. That's true. We have an affordability crisis in this country. That's true. We should have a wider array of housing types that allow people to move into, different kinds of housing for their life stage. Not everybody needs an acre. Not everybody needs, a half acre. But not everybody wants a 1/10 acre townhouse either. So having some diversity and some choices are an important part of this. And then finally, just new standards for new uses, right? We've talked about data centers, right? That's one of the things that's out there, and how do we manage stuff like that? But that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's many, many other things that we need to be thinking about, okay? Event centers, small-scale nuclear reactors, you name it. There's things coming that we don't even know about yet. So adding some new use types and some procedures to accommodate unlisted uses are an important part of this new code. This is the number one problem that you guys face. This is it. This is the biggest problem that you've got, all right? Your roadway system was built under rules that are 40 or 50 years old, okay? The road widths that you've got here in this county are inadequate, and in some cases, unsafe. And we've got development pressure to put still more growth and traffic on those streets. And everybody knows it. This is a problem. And we would suggest a variety of things to address that problem. A new approach to classifying streets. And when a street has a functional level of traffic congestion, and when that level of traffic congestion is unfunctional, no longer functional, and therefore development's severely limited unless and until it improves that congestion. Today, for some reason, which I don't fully understand, your street regulations are organized by use type, which makes no sense because I can't regulate different uses. So that's sort of interesting to have residential streets in an area where I can't have residential use types, or at least I can't regulate those. We would suggest a slightly different approach to how that's done. This is a biggie. More off-street roadway improvements. When development does come to the county, applicants are only required to make roadway improvements along their frontage. That's it. Okay, that's great as long as the traffic doesn't go anywhere farther than the frontage of the development, but that doesn't happen, does it? So how do we get some of this traffic managed in areas off-site? How do we do a better job at that? It's a really important part of this. I know there's a lot of concern and skepticism about the county's transportation impact analysis procedure, right? I bring my fancy mouthpiece and you bring your fancy mouthpiece, and one says we can do it and one says we can't. And who do we believe, and all of that? That issue is real. What we would suggest is that the county invoke a third-party review option that allows the county to bring a third party in and adjudicate between differential transportation impact analysis. Who pays for that? The applicant does. Who picks the third party? The county does. Okay? The idea here is to vet these transportation impact analyses, the ones that people feel are suspect. Updating our public roadway cross sections. Cross section is the amount of pavement, the cartway width, how wide the road is. Okay? That needs to be adjusted. You have collector and thoroughfare streets that have 22 to 24 foot wide cross sections. Okay? That's not very wide. I think you know that. And we need to make some adjustments there, at least for our higher order streets. Roadway continuation standards. I know y'all are like a good road state and you've already got a lot of roads. The problem is there's not a lot of ways to get where you want to go. Having a more vibrant roadway network that allows me multiple ways to get to my destination is something that's needed, and we would suggest that that be addressed. When new development comes in, we plan to extend the roadways into vacant lands. Finally, addressing traffic calming, because if we're going to extend roadways and we're going to connect roads, we're going to have cut-through traffic, and we don't want that. How do we manage that so that life in neighborhoods remains livable? These transportation concerns, these are our number one problem. Okay, this is one of the biggest livability challenges that we've got. Solving this is going to take more than the LUDO. The LUDO will help, but there'll be other things that come. And the work of a group that is put together, I hope, by the county to deal with this issue will continue well past the LUDO's adoption. This is a long-term problem. It took us 100 years to get here, and we're not going to solve it in the next year. It's going to mean the development community has to put more money on the table. It's going to mean the county may have to go to the General Assembly and get some additional authorization to do things it's not doing now. And it may also mean more taxes. Okay. Raising the bar for quality. If we're going to get development here in Anderson County, it should be good. It should be the best that we can get, right? First and foremost, we want to suggest some new single-family design standards, some new minimum quality requirements for residential development. Okay? The 1,000 units on the slabs, not going to get there from here. Better quality exterior materials, more deviation in the designs that are used, better integration of open space, more landscaping. Okay? Softer impact, softer footprint on the environment, better design. Reforming your open space standards, more open space generally across the board for all use types, and not just open space that's passive. Did you know that commercial development can treat its parking islands as open space? How many of us have sat down in a parking island recently and said, wow, isn't this great? I love sitting here. Nobody, that's who. Farmland compatibility standards. If you're near a farm, there should be some requirements. The open space that you have to provide should be near the farm. You should be made aware that you're going near a farm. Why? So that when you try to complain later when it's fertilizing time, you know somebody told you, oh, you live next to a farm and you're going to have some of these impacts if you decide to live next to a farm. Larger lots next to the farm, better buffering of the farm. So some recognition and protection of the farming use is something that we would suggest. If the county is truly interested in protecting its agricultural heritage and its farmland, then these kinds of farmland compatibility standards are one of the best ways to do that. You guys have recently adopted some mass grading standards and some tree protection standards, which is fantastic. I look forward to helping you get those into the English language. It will be great when we can review those and make them a little bit easier to understand. How many of you have read those standards? Okay. I see you frowning, so I know you know what I'm talking about. Those standards have really good ideas, but they're very hard to follow and could be improved drastically. Enhancing stormwater. I already talked about stormwater. We've got to deal with the more rain that's coming out of the sky. Overhauling your landscaping and signage rules. That's something for us to talk about as we go along. Maybe this is low-hanging fruit for us. Maybe this is something that we really don't care that much about. If we protect farmland and we deal with development and growth, then maybe we don't need to worry about landscaping and signage. But then maybe we do. That's something that we hope to talk to you guys about more in the future. For sure, we want to be sure that your signage rules comply with federal law. Okay? We'll talk more about that in coming weeks. Finally, reducing parking requirements generally. As a society, we have too much parking. Did you know that parking drives the development equation? Most developers figure out how much is it going to cost me to get the required amount of parking that I need. And then they think about the building, which is backwards. Okay. Incorporating some flexibility and some incentives. Now, don't get scared, okay? Because this is not necessarily about, giving away freebies to the development community. Far from it. The one impression that you should have after listening to me talk is that we're not here to make life easy for the developers. That said, putting some incentives on the table to give them an economic reason to give us the kind of development that we'd like to have makes sense. Whether that's the superior environmental design that's already embedded within your mass grading and tree protection standards, or it's new sustainable development incentives that encourage green stormwater practices, or energy conservation, or habitat protection, or better stormwater management. Incorporating incentives that brings us a win-win. Very, very important. I mentioned conditional zoning. That is where we make a deal. Yes, your elected officials are going to have to become better negotiators. Yes, people who live in this community are going to have to become more active advocates for quality growth and development. Not for no growth and no development, okay? Because if you get no growth and no development, you know what's going to happen to your taxes? They're going to go up because costs of living go up. They don't go down. Okay? More taxes you have coming in, the lower your tax bill is going to grow, the slower. Administrative adjustments. alternative plan compliance. There are parts of the county that are appropriate for more development because they already have sewer, they already have water, they already have roadways. You're going to get a set amount of growth in this county and not much more. And that's governed by the laws of economics that are more complicated than we want to go into right now. We need to work with those. The sites that are in areas that are already served by water, sewer, and good roadway that are vacant for a reason. Most of the time the reason is it's because it's difficult to develop those sites. We want to remove those impediments and make those sites that are in areas that are already served by infrastructure, areas where we've already made investment, to be developed before somebody considers going out to Star or going out to the hinterlands and building out there. Okay? So that's what administrative adjustments and alternative plan compliance is all about. Some more fee in lieu options so that we can create some revenue streams to do the kinds of things that we need to do, whether that's with open space or parks or landscaping or roadways, sidewalks. Okay? So these are the concepts in more detail than I had before when I was before you last time. All right, so we're starting to build. We're sort of going step by step, explaining what we've done and where we're going. Today, tomorrow, over the next couple of weeks, if you have comments about what you've read in the code diagnosis, what you've heard today, what you're hearing from your neighbors, share it. Tell us what you think. Tell us where you agree. Tell us where you disagree. Ask the questions. If I didn't talk about something and you're like, wait a minute, what about this or that? Ask so that we can answer the question. You can write it down today. You can ask it when you get the microphone. You can put it on the web page. You can call staff. Okay? We've got other specialty conversations that we've got to have. Transportation, I mentioned earlier. Thorny issue, difficult to manage. We're trying to sort through it. How do we do this? There's things that have to be done that are outside the LUDO. How are we going to manage that? So we're going to continue to conduct those conversations over the next weeks. The next step for us is the annotated outline. If the code diagnosis is the recipe book, then the annotated outline is the picture in the cookbook. That is the example of what we would be doing. Okay? It's our blueprint. We'll lay out the LUDO structure. This annotated outline will cover all of the sections in the document. It'll present the page layout. It'll give you the main section contents for every section in the code. It's going to give you some examples about where uses would go, how we might change districts, a list of the summary procedures, some examples. Okay? It will also bring in an initial zoning map. Now remember, 25% of your land area has zoning. Remember those 27 zoning districts that you've got. We would suggest that be consolidated, cut in half at least. We want to come back and show you a first cut at what that might look like. We're going to take this information and we're going to do a public video of the annotated outline. And we're going to do a couple of webinars, one with the Planning Commission, one with the steering committee that's been convened to do this effort. And if there's clamor and hue and cry from the community, Karen and I might come back and talk to you again if you want us to. If not, then you can just hear about this on the internet and we'll see where we go from there. We're happy to come back and talk, but this is our plan for the next steps. To hear from you on the code diagnosis over the next couple of weeks, to have the special conversations with transportation people, with stormwater people, etc. And then begin to turn this into this annotated outline, this dry run of the LUDO, and then come back and share with you what that looks like and get your thoughts. Okay? That's everything I have. What questions do we have? Thanks, Karen. Okay. So penmanship here is key. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to read these. And if you have a question, raise your hand or whatever, and Karen will come over and get the microphone. The reason she's got a microphone is because we're recording this. We want to be able to put this on the web page so that everybody can see. So, first question, how can the recommended policy champions include more agribusiness and conservation champions? So, the question really is, how do we get better conservation here in the county, right? Does that make sense? You guys have a conservation subdivision procedure now. It's kind of been a dismal failure for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're not requiring enough open space, okay? You require 20% open space for your conservation subdivision. That should be 50. Half the land area should be conservation land, okay? It should be undisturbed, or it could be allowed to be agriculture, okay? So if I'm a farmer and I want to be able to continue to farm, but I need to capture some of the value of my land, I might consider doing a conservation subdivision, okay? So I can continue to farm, right? But I can also capture some of the value that's locked up in my property. Now, one is the amount of open space. We need to work on that. Number two, if I can see the development from an off-site road, or I can see your conservation subdivision from my neighborhood, then it's a failure. We don't want to see that, because that kind of development has smaller lots, homes that are closer together, okay? That's not consistent with our rural character, with our agricultural heritage. Now, how many of you fly planes? Okay, fly planes. Nobody. How many of you drive cars? How do you experience the rural character? From your windshield. So, I would posit to you that if we can build developments that protect open space and are not visible to you as you drive your car, then we have protected the community character as you understand it. Okay, so think about that as a way for us to think about how do we accommodate growth and development in ways that protect open space, protect farmland, still give us housing options, but don't interfere with my ability to interact with the community that I know and love. Okay? So that's an important part of it. Open space reform generally, that's an important part of conservation. Farmland compatibility standards, protecting farmland from encroaching development that's inappropriate. That's a way to protect conservation. You guys have your riparian buffers, so that'll continue. We've got your mass grading limitations and your tree protection standards. We're going to review that, hopefully enhance it, at least make it intelligible. All right? And so that's a way to protect conservation. So there's 5 or 6 ways that we would suggest this be done. And there's probably some others that maybe you can think of. Okay, 2.12, somebody, 2 points for commenting on one of the policy recommendations. Ensure written decisions are provided to applicants. Decisions should be posted on website in a timely manner for impacted residents. Okay, that's a great point. So what they're asking is, if a new application is approved, decided, then there should be notice put up on the webpage. Or denied. Thank you. Or denied. Great comment. Karen, does Clayton still manage a new development website? Have you seen, can you talk more about some of the tools that you've seen in other communities where residents are able to track applications after the decision-making process?
This doesn't work except for
Yeah, you got to come over here.
Okay, so I am a consultant in a small town, well, a growing town in North Carolina, and I work in their community development department, and they maintain a active development map. So on their website, you can just go on their website at any time and click on the map to see, where you live, if there's an active project. It'll bring up all the information related to that project. It'll show you the site plan, it'll give you the case number, and it'll give you whether it was, in process, it's been before the planning board, or if it's going to be before council, if it was approved, denied. If there were conditions of approval, those conditions are also listed. And if they're not listed actually there, it'll provide you with a link to the folder where that stuff is. So that is just something that we've recommended to some of our clients, to have that type of visibility and transparency with the public. So those are kind of things that we're aiming for.
Thank you. That's especially important. Remember, one of the things I said earlier was we were talking about a TRC, a technical review committee, who was going to be making decisions potentially on subdivisions and site plans and concept plans. If we go to a situation where there are staff decisions or more staff-like decisions being made, the public needs to be kept aware of applications that have been filed, what the status of those applications are, and what was the outcome. these kinds of development maps are one of the best ways to do that. And we would strongly suggest that you guys consider doing this, whether you go forward with the LUDO or not, okay? So, great question. 3.1, growth tiers. We've got an overachiever here. All right. How will a new opportunities and constraints map be developed for unzoned areas? Example of how it will be used. Great question. I wish I had all the answers to that great question at this moment. At this point, we're still shopping the concept. First and foremost, the opportunities and constraints map applies solely within unzoned areas, okay? Because zoned areas already have guidance about what's the array of allowable uses that are appropriate, what are the densities, what are the setbacks. We have that information on hand. It's already set down in the zoning provisions. It's the unzoned portions of the county that we don't know, right? And so the idea behind this concept is, let's take the GIS information that we have today, right, that we can easily access, and put it on a map and see where are the areas where it makes sense for development to go given the amount of information that we've got. Where are the areas where it doesn't make sense for development based on that same set of information? Now, with that information in hand, we can then do three things. One, decide how easy or difficult it's going to be to develop in an opportunity area versus a constrained area, all right? Could be the same use type, the review process might be different based on whether you're in one area or the other. Another possible distinction is density and dimensional standards. Densities in opportunity areas might be slightly higher. Development dimensional requirements might be slightly smaller than they would be in a constrained area, right? We want to raise or elevate or at least maintain current development potential levels in opportunity areas and clamp down on or restrain development potential in constrained areas, okay? That's the concept. How's it going to work? We don't know. We're still thinking about that. We're still trying to figure this out. How do you write a zoning map for an area that doesn't have zoning? That's what we're trying to figure out. But that's the concept. If the community supports this notion, we'll continue to work with this and come back and talk more about it in the annotated outline. This map would be part of your LUDO. It would be part of your land use and development ordinance. It's not a policy guidance. It carries the weight of law, and it needs to be updated regularly by your planning commission, okay? It's a great question. I wish I had a better answer, but hopefully the concept is one that can get traction. 3.5, conditional zoning. How can it be used to direct development towards future land use map and comprehensive plan? Great question. The old adage, you can attract more flies with honey than with vinegar, right? If there are areas on the future land use map that call for or that indicate that more development or a certain kind of development is appropriate in these locations, then we can incentivize that to happen in those locations through the LUDO, even in the unzoned areas, okay? Through our procedural ease, through our development standards, through our dimensional requirements, etc. So we have some levers that we can move to make one area more or less attractive relative to other areas. And that would be the suggested approach that we take, with a heavy reliance on incentives, less of a reliance on prohibitions, okay? That's an important concept. Because you don't have zoning, if somebody wants to do a use, they can do it, right? In the unzoned areas. So how do we balance that and make that a more thoughtful process? 3.7, establish initial zoning. How do other South Carolina counties do initial zoning? Is there best practice? You're the only county in South Carolina that applies zoning by voter precinct. Planning issues, growth issues, transportation issues, stormwater, environmental, does not follow zoning or voting precincts. Voting precincts is a construct that is a political idea. It is not a real-world idea. Topographic conditions don't follow voting precincts. This was done for reasons of political expediency. Nobody in South Carolina does it. As far as I can tell, nobody in the country does it. Why do you do it? I don't know. Can you not do it anymore? Yes, you can. How? You change your policy. And you move away from that. That will require you to have this initial laydown of zoning across the county. That will not be easy. This process might ultimately become that. You need to get your checkbook out. Just kidding. That is something that could be pursued, is moving away from the referendum-based, voter precinct-based approach to laying zoning on the ground. I have never seen another community who does it this way. It is usually done by fiat of the elected officials. They decide they want zoning on the ground, and there is a public process where that's discussed, choices are made, and then it's adopted. And that's usually how it works. It's a great question. How can establishment of initial zoning be used to direct development towards future land use map? A great question, which is sort of a riff on what I was talking about, where the elected officials discuss, decide, and lay zoning on the ground. There are communities, at least in North Carolina, that are partially zoned, much like you, right? Again, about a quarter of Anderson County has zoning. If we decided to move away from a petition-based approach to establishing zoning, could the elected officials pick and choose areas that got zoning on a schedule or a time frame? Yeah, sure they could. That needs to be, the mechanics of that need to be discussed and vetted by the community, but certainly that's a possibility. This is all within the wheelhouse of your elected officials. This is squarely within your policy choice. Okay, so great questions. What to do about making zoning more intelligible, or at least not such a hurdle, at least for the communities that want it. Okay. Why isn't the Pendleton area given adequate coverage? Jenkins House, ? Clemson Forest, T. Ed Garrison Arena Event Center. So, this is a question for the person who asked the question. When you say adequate coverage, what do you mean? Hold on one second. We want to get you on tape. This is your moment of fame. I'll repeat the question. That won't amplify your voice, but it will put it on the tape. I'll repeat your question.
Okay, with looking at, first of all, the comprehensive plan, I saw a very, what I thought noticeable lack of attention to not developments, but use, especially agricultural use in the Pendleton area, and historical use. Okay. And that's kind
so
of
that's
where
the
I was
question,
going.
right?
Yes.
So the question is, in looking at the future land use map and that information, it felt like there was a lack of attention or detail given to the areas that you mentioned in Pendleton.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
I don't know how. I'm not sure. Staff, do you want to try to take a stab at that? Sorry to put you on the spot, Joan.
About just the land use map, or in addressing it in the comp plan? One of the things we tried to do in the comp plan is stick to things that were totally Anderson County either controlled, or Anderson County has a great deal of influence over, just so that we would have something that we could work with immediately. So we did not include those things, but we left opportunities for those things to be discussed in things like tourism plans, a housing plan, a transportation committee, things like that.
the Clemson Forest, especially the Fants Grove area, that is in Anderson County. The T. Ed Garrison Arena and Event Center is in Anderson County. They might get some support through Clemson University, but those areas are within Anderson County. And the Clemson Forest, especially the Fants Grove area, it does have like 43 miles of trails, foot trails for people to use free of charge. The Clemson, the T. Ed Garrison Arena does put on multiple agricultural-based activities. They do apply and do receive Anderson County ATAX funding, and so that's why I was wondering. I have not seen any mention addressing them in the comp plan or in the land use development.
We definitely realize they are in Anderson County, but they're not directly under Anderson County's control. That's the reason we didn't really include those in this comp plan, because, you know, there are things that we left to discuss, you know, later as we were developing, I guess, projects from the comp plan that we were trying to accomplish. But they are very important to Anderson County, but they're not under the control of Anderson County.
So we'll try to do, we'll try to set up enough time so that we can have one-on-one conversations, because it'll be really hard for us to pick up everybody's back and forth. So let me try to get through the 3 questions that I've got remaining, and then we'll move to the next section, which is just an opportunity to have one-on-one conversation instead of all these microphones and all this. Okay, I've got a couple more questions here. Address transportation concern. Recommendation to create an expert group to address the crafting of county comprehensive solutions of transportation problems. Yes, was there a question on this, or was this, who wrote this one?
There's a recommendation under section 4
Yes.
to do this. What's the status of it, or is it just a recommendation?
The status is I'm begging anybody in county staff I can to help create this group. You guys have already a group that was assembled to start to talk about this, and that was our starting point for going forward. Public service announcement. If you know anything about transportation or want to be involved in transportation, please reach out to county staff to join this group where we're going to talk about funding, maintenance, standards, probably over the next 2 years, to try to address some of the problems that the county's facing. That's where we are, and we'll keep banging the drum for that. You have another point in here, which is establish a new roadway level of service standard regimen to replace ADT system. C41 on next card. 4.1, transportation concerns. Current rules for state roads and collector streets. Some streets should not be defined as collector streets because of changes. So, we are contemplating or suggesting a more robust approach to street classification. The establishment of what we call a level of service standard, which would be a grade, a rating of how much traffic is moving through that roadway system and the degree to which that roadway system can handle that amount of traffic. If things are great and the road can easily handle the traffic on it, it would get an A. If things are lousy and the road is not handling the traffic very well, it might get an E or an F. It might fail. In those instances where roadway segments are failing and new development is proposed, guess what the applicant's going to have to do? Help. They're going to have to provide additional land, roadway, other off-site improvements to at least maintain the level of service, if not improve it. Maybe we have a minimum maintenance requirement and some incentives to improve it. So that's the concept. And the point that you're making is some streets shouldn't be defined as collectors. And that point's well taken. One of the first parts of this process is to figure out what are the roads that we have here in Anderson County and what are the level of scores that they have right now, the level of service scores. So, good question. This is something that we're working on. Okay, last question that's written. How does Anderson County's Planning Commission compare to others that I have seen? Well, they're all beautiful people. They're wonderful in every way. They give willingly of their time and expertise. And if that's something that you don't do, please consider doing. Is there a better process for member selection? That's a great question. Generally speaking, in most places, how membership is derived on either a planning commission or a board of appeals is quite simply that there is an open application process. And those who want to apply do so. There are not usually any location-based provisions. There are not individual representatives that are appointed by individual elected officials. It is at large in most cases. Not every case, but in most cases, it is at large for a variety of reasons. Your planning commission is deeply dedicated to what they do. They take their job very seriously. And I'm sure that they would very much like to get into the business of planning and out of the business of development review, because that is a place for professional staff. The anger, the hostility, the compromise, the technical nature of that discussion is appropriate with people who get paid to do this for a living, not for volunteers who are just trying to help their community. Okay? There's a time and a place and an appropriate set of activity for them to engage in, and review of technical subdivisions ain't it. Okay, that is it for the written questions. Does anybody have, it is 7:19, so we have about 45 minutes or so. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? If so, could you flag Karen down? Oh, you do have something on the back which says enforcement.
Yeah, that was the other side. That was a kind of a different question. But my question on the Planning Commission was because I kind of see here in the county how those members are selected, who's sitting up there. There's a lot of mistrust, I think, with the Planning Commission on the motivation for the people that are up there, right? I was surprised at how little vetting there is in terms of the entire council for putting people on there. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the process is open, and people don't understand that the process is open and anybody can apply and put their name in. The form that they give you is a PDF that's been scanned years ago, and so they're not getting word out in the public that anybody can really apply for those positions, whether they're in the district or not. And I think that this thing where they just appoint one person, I think the whole council should be looking at the qualifications of that person and why they're interested in that, and they should take more information from that person than just what their college degree is and what their last job was or whatever. Right. I think the city has a really good form for that. So I didn't know if you guys had any suggestions for that or could provide some advice for council in terms of vetting those members. Doing a better job of that.
It's a great question. So the question really is, the process that the county uses today to install planning commission members lacks criteria for applicants, and the application materials themselves are a little outdated, and we're not doing a good enough job advertising the fact that anybody can sign up for this based on the district where you're located. And those are all important things to think about. Now, some advisory bodies have specific qualifications that are called for. For example, a historic preservation commission, one who reviews applications for historic development, like what you might see in Charleston or in Savannah or whatever. Those folks have specific criteria that they need to have. They need to be a historic preservationist, they need to be an architect, they need to be an engineer, etc. They're supposed to demonstrate some utility with the topics of interest that they regulate. Could you do something like that for Planning Commission? Absolutely. A lot of places don't. Why not? Because they can't find enough applicants to staff the board as it is. I serve on the Board of Appeals where I live. We've been down 3 members for a year. And if we can get a living body to sit in a chair, we're like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I think if you guys have a lot of applicants and there's a lot of interest in being on Planning Commission or in your Board of Appeals, that's fantastic. And you should be having these qualification provisions, these thresholds. If you can't find enough people to sit on your boards, and I don't know what y'all's situation is, then you have to settle for what you can get. Or pay more money. Do you guys give money to your Planning Commission members or your Board of Adjustment members? $50. That's what we get. You know, it's basically just enough to cover your travel and maybe lunch. So, stuff for us to think about. Can we put things in the LUDO that contemplate minimum standard requirements or areas of expertise for Planning Commission members? Sure. Yeah, you certainly could. If that's something that people... Better training. Right. Better training. Training, I'll mention this. This has nothing to do with the LUDO, but yes, all of your boards and commissions should be trained at least once every year. Every year. On the process, the statutes, and you should go over your cases at the end of the year. You should go over what you did, what worked, what didn't work, etc. You asked a very good question on the back, which was enforcement. People feeling good about enforcement here in Anderson County? Enforcement of the zoning rules? Yes, no? Development rules? Yeah. I haven't heard anybody who said enforcement's going great. Not a one. This is a big, big problem. We are anticipating reviewing, updating, and rewriting a lot of your enforcement provisions. There's 1 or 2 important things to keep in mind, and it's our guiding light when we think about these kinds of standards. If you cannot enforce that rule, do not put it in your book, because a rule that can't be enforced is worse than no rule at all. You guys have an enforcement staff that's growing. We're told there's 7 people on that staff, 3 of which are certified or vested in the ability to actively enforce the development regulations in the county. I think that's a step forward. I think things are better now than they have been in the past. I think there's room for improvement. But there is also great concern about bandwidth and the ability to do this job well. One of the things that has been discussed recently, and I'll just float this out for people to consider, is the possibility that complaints no longer be anonymous. That if you would like to register a complaint against development that you see here in the county that's not following the rules, then you should have to sign a piece of paper that puts your name on it. Something to think about. If you've got an enforcement staff that can't keep up because they are getting 45 or 50 anonymous tips every day, maybe there's something else that should be explored there. That's a great question. Other questions?
That's a very smart decision, don't make it on that. That's the reason we sell it in Idaho, because it's almost enforcement. You don't own your own property. So that's why we sell. That's really a lot of people sell, is to get out.
Get out. All right. Well, that is the presentation. We've got 30 minutes or so. I really, really encourage you guys. You got one more? Well, let's hear it.
I don't know whether you can make any suggestions or what, but what I've seen is in Anderson County that
A lot of our regulations in Anderson County are better or stricter or more comprehensive than a lot of the municipalities. And I'm finding that developers are going to some of these municipalities because their restrictions or requirements for development are less, and they're asking municipalities to annex those properties into their municipalities just so that they can, it appears to be that they want to be able to build at a lower standard or a more dense standard. And is there any way that that can be stopped or averted or whatever? It's non-productive especially for the people and the communities surrounding these annexations.
Right. Great question. So the question is, what do we do about the fact that the municipalities in the county have standards that are less restrictive than ours, and that's acting as a magnet for development? Development is flocking to the lands approximate to the municipal boundaries, seeking annexation, and then developing under a less restrictive standard. And that's an issue and a concern, and that was something that has come up recently. It's actually kind of a unique situation. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's the cities that have the more restrictive standards and the county that doesn't, right? And most people want to go to the county because taxes are lower and the regulations are less strict, right? But here, different. What do you do about it? That's a very good question. One option for you to consider, while it doesn't have anything to do with the Land Use and Development Ordinance, is the preparation of annexation agreements with all of the municipalities in the county, where you guys draw firm lines that say, look, beyond this line, you will not annex. This is the area that you can have Anderson or Star or whatever community that you want to talk about. Those agreements are often put in place and revisited on some sort of periodic basis, every 5 years, every 10 years. And it gives some surety to everybody about where the lines are and where growth is going to happen, at least within the cities. It gives the county a voice in the annexation agreement. And one last thing that I would consider suggesting to you is that as part of these annexation agreements, now you're going to have to give the city something, okay? Because right now they don't need to play ball with you. They can just annex the land whenever they want. So is there something that you can bring to the table? And if there is, I mean, we can think about this and get back to you, but if there's something that you can bring to the table in this annexation agreement discussion, okay, then another thing that you can incorporate in that discussion is an expectation on the part of the municipality to raise their standards on lots that are approximate to the county, okay? We call them transitional development standards. And they feather development standards outwards from the core of the city. If development inside the city has bad regulations and isn't subject to very strict standards, the county has more restrictive standards, and you'd like to see a smoother transition instead of a hard edge, right? Then you might ask those municipalities to upgrade their development standards in areas proximate to the annexation agreement boundary. Okay, so we need to come up with some kind of incentive for these municipalities to enter into these agreements and then exert influence in the form of, one, limitations on where annexation can happen, where it has to stop, and two, transitional development standards that require the municipalities to have better development standards in areas proximate to the unincorporated county. So we can talk about that. That's outside the realm of the LUDO, but it's an interesting concept that's in use in a lot of communities in very urban areas. Just usually in reverse. It usually works the other way. Great question. Okay, if there are no other questions, I will thank you guys for coming. Please take a few minutes, have a look at stuff on the wall. I'll be here, Karen will be here. Thank you to Joan Holliday from county staff. If you have any questions about the comprehensive plan, she is the go-to. Again, I just thank you all for coming. Please go to the webpage. We've got a board over here or that table. If you have questions that you don't want to ask but you want us to deal with, write your question on a sticky and we'll make sure that we write an answer down on the webpage, okay? We did make a video of this and we'll be posting this video on the project webpage, andersoncountyludo.com, okay? Thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much.
family farms. It's been in the families for
Okay.
150 years.
Wow.